Coming from Central Kentucky, land of horses, bourbon, and basketball, straight to your ears, ChickenCoopGuides.com presents AgriCast Digest, your place to get news and information about anything agriculturally related. Please welcome your host, Gabrielle Yoder.
Hey folks, welcome to this week's episode of AgriCast Digest. I have some recent news for you as well as some Q&A. We're also working on an awesome lineup of people to interview this summer about a variety of subjects, and we hope to have a tentative schedule up for y'all pretty soon. Now, I'm not sure how many of you have been following the avian flu outbreak this year. The USDA estimates that about 40 million poultry have either died or been culled because of it. If you didn't know before, it's often spread by wild birds making contact with domesticated birds, which is why it tends to show up more when the geese and ducks are migrating, which is, the fall and in the spring and winter. However, the USDA has noticed that backyard chicken farmers have not been highly impacted. This is the opposite of what they assumed, since backyard chickens usually have more access to the open and thus more access to wild birds who spread the virus. But despite the crazy sanitation and safety precautions the big battery farms are taking, such as disinfecting delivery trucks, they're wearing everything but a biohazard suit, people. They're taking some major precautions here, and the commercial poultry continues to die in near record numbers, while backyard chickens are hardly touched at all. One of the good things about being a chicken farmer is that if you have dual purpose birds, you won't be paying the exorbitant prices for chicken that most people are going to be paying this fall, I can guarantee you. Now, there's been 181 outbreaks so far reported, and the USDA says that only 18 out of 181 outbreaks are on non-commercial farms. So why do you think that is? I don't want to gross anyone out here, but have you ever seen what happens to the chickens in those big commercial farms? They're beakless, they're cramped, they're forced to lay until they're of no more use. Their feet curl up, and then they die. Their living conditions are disgusting, and it's really heartbreaking. So the USDA is discovering what any vet could tell you, which is a healthy animal has more natural resistance to viruses than an unhealthy animal. It's the same as plants, the same as human beings. I mean, this is kind of a no-brainer, I would think, folks. But this is really why it's important to treat your animals respectfully. Bird flu can spread to humans. It does happen. It has happened. And this whole thing is just a matter of reaping what you sow. You can have commercial farms where chickens are not treated like this. It's possible to do it. Does it cost a little more? Maybe, maybe not. Is it worth doing? It's absolutely worth doing. Do I sound like I'm really trying to push this home to people? Yes. Just think about the swine flu outbreak that happened a few years ago. They traced that back eventually to a horrible little rundown farm in Mexico owned by the Smithfield Corporation, where these pigs were being treated horribly. And that farm was the reason we had the swine flu outbreak. And it wasn't as bad as everyone said it was. It wasn't a worldwide pandemic, but people did die. So this is really something important to do. It's important to treat animals respectfully. I'm hoping I don't sound as crazy as that. Her name is Snow Lady. I hope not. Have y'all heard of her before? I'm going to play the clip. You've got to hear this. It's worth at least one good listen through.
Excuse me, everyone. Can I ask you to listen to me for a minute, please? I have a little girl. She was very abused for her entire life. She was terrified. She has a very determined look in her eyes wherever she goes. And she was hurt and abused her entire life because of this establishment and because of establishments like it. She was locked away. She was hidden. She had nobody there for her. She was crying. She was scared every single moment. And because her usefulness had run out, she was going to be killed. Someone was going to murder her. And I can see you smiling, and I can see you laughing. But to her, this is not funny. I went in there with other humans, and I took her out of there. And if I hadn't, she wouldn't be with me right now. She would be gone, just like all of her sisters. just like everybody who we left behind. And I'm here to tell you today that all of those other girls and everyone who we left behind, they just wanted to live too, and they deserve their lives. And right now, their eggs and their milk and their bodies are on plates inside this restaurant, and that is so unfair to them. My little girl's name is Snow. And every time you see someone eating somebody else's eggs or somebody else's body, you are going to remember her name. Her name is Snow. She's a beautiful little girl and she just wants to live. This isn't food. It's violence.
Okay. I should make fun of the mentally ill. And when I heard it on the radio, I'd missed the DJ talking about it, and I thought she was just talking about her child. I really thought she was talking about a human child. She's got, what's that? I think it's called transference issues in psychology. Anyway, apparently the whole segment that what I listened to out on the radio started because of a recent Gallup poll that said that 1/3 of Americans want human rights for animals, which is a ridiculous concept. Animals can't vote. They shouldn't. I mean, it would be like asking, hey, Mr. Cow, go to the polls and vote for a bill about cow rights. I mean, it's just, I think people didn't understand. I think it meant more like 1/3 of people in America want animals to have rights, to, have the right to clean water and clean food and not be abused. I don't think they understood what was meant by human rights for animals. I mean, they could think that, I don't know. I really wish folks would kind of place somewhere in the middle without all these crazy extremes. You've got everyone either feels like they have to be PETA or a battery farm. So, I think the middle ground is better. Now, before I get on to another tangent about that, let me just advise you that you should probably take this bird flu epidemic at least a little seriously. I don't mean batten down the hatches, but you should practice some basic safety tips that are good to practice anyway. It's best to get your birds from farms that have a certified clean bill of health. And you can ask the county extension office for a list of recommendations where you live. And if you go to another farm, at least change your clothes and shoes before going out to tend to your own flock. That's good hygiene to practice anyway. That other farm could have who knows what going on in their soil or in their muck, or, their cows could have some disease that gets passed to birds or chickens or humans or whatever. So, it's always best to change your clothes and shoes before cross-contaminating between one farm and another. And this, as a standard suggestion, has also always been to give your birds well water instead of pond water. Since pond water is open and it can be affected by wild birds and their droppings. There was also a farmer a few years ago who he lost most of the animals on his farm because he watered them all with pond water, and he hadn't realized that one of his cows, was like a baby calf, had wandered into the pond and died and contaminated the whole pond water, or, like the whole pond, and a bunch of the animals drank from it and got sick. So, keep a closed water system. If you can't do well water, or, just don't do pond water. It's not safe. Now, the summer weather should probably kill off most of the bird flu, but just keep these suggestions in mind when the weather starts to cool down and the migratory birds start coming back. Obviously, you also want to prevent as many interactions as possible between your flock and the wild birds. So try to not let them share food. And sometimes you can put some very light netting over the top of their runs and stuff, and it kind of helps keep birds away that way too. Now I've got some stuff here for Q&A. Looks like I've got several questions here. We had a question recently from our good buddy Ken Lang. He writes, "We have had an abundance of rain in the past couple months. The gnats and flies are getting to be a problem, mostly the gnats, which he says are white miniature flies. What do you suggest? My birds are going crazy." I sympathize with you, Ken. This is going to be a big problem this summer because a lot of areas that don't normally get a lot of rainfall are getting a lot of rainfall, and it's causing a lot of epidemics with flies and mosquitoes and stuff. The gnats can be a big problem if they get up into the nostrils and bother the hens that way. It can actually smother them, but that's usually really extreme cases. What you can do is you can go to your local Amish store or your local Walmart or Costco. Go and get one of those big, huge, like I'm talking probably 8 to 16 ounce bottles of really cheap imitation Mexican vanilla. It's not even vanilla, it's vanillin or something. Mix it with equal parts of water and just hose your coop and your chickens down with it. And this is going to help repel flies and gnats. Now you can also set out little shallow dishes full of a solution that I make. It's really easy. But just put it in places where your chickens can't get to it. It'll drown out the bugs though. Just take water with equal parts vinegar and a squirt of dish soap. And then what you want to do is you want to pour this into these little shallow dishes and pour a cone of sugar into the middle of it so that it sticks up above the water line. The sugar will draw them in and it'll kill them. This also works inside the house too. So every summer we get those little fruit flies and gnats and the big fat black flies, and it kills them all inside and out. We put it near our fruit dish in the kitchen because we're in Kentucky. There's a lot of, flies and stuff. So we put it in the kitchen. We put a couple on the back porch, and then we put them in the coops, and it usually helps. And you just swap it out every 3 days as you remember about it. It will evaporate over time, so just make sure you refresh it, every few days. I got the next question from Suzanne. Now she writes, I thought I read somewhere about how the perch should be higher from the floor than the nesting box, and how much higher. Plus, how wide the perch should the perch be so that it is comfortable for the chicks to hold on to, and how high off the floor so that they don't have to jump up too high. So I was wondering if you had information about these things to help, please. Also, we have 4 chicks now, but I was thinking of building a coop big enough for up to 8 chicks, but I read the coop size should be small enough for the chicks to stay warm in winter. We don't have very cold winters, say about 40 to 48 degrees Fahrenheit overnight. But if I do build a bigger coop, while there are still only 4 chickens, it would be a good idea to make an extra enclosure around the perch inside the coop to keep them warm. Cheers, Suzanne. That's a lot. There's a few questions in there, so let me take them one at a time. First thing, if you have 4 chickens, then they probably already have a pretty well-defined pecking order. And when chickens perch, your head honcho is going to take the highest perch automatically and is going to leave the lower bars to the other hens who are further down the totem pole. If you think about it in a survivalist type of thought process, what the head chicken is really doing is taking the safest perch, because if they were in the forest where they natively came from, the birds that were up highest off the ground were going to be safer from predators than the ones that were lower. So this makes sense. They're going to all want to be as high as possible. I would stagger several heights of whatever you use. I use branches, but you can use sanded lumber. Those are some of the best materials. But I would stagger several heights of them like stairs to do. They can pick out what they want. And you can start about 10 inches above the roost and go as high as you like. It'll certainly make things easier if you do expand to more chickens if you intend to do that. And I would not buy any brand new lumber. You're just going to have to chuck it out with fall or spring cleaning anyway. I mean, we rotate ours out like once or twice a year. So they get covered in chicken poop, and there's only so many times you can clean them. And, if it's a branch, then I can toss it in the compost or something versus, some fancy, thing that we got from the store. So just make it simple for yourself. As far as the roost width, I'd suggest about 3 to 4 inches so that they can sleep completely flat-footed. If their feet have to curl a little bit, makes them a little uncomfortable and it can hurt their feet. With the extra enclosure to keep them warm, I wouldn't bother. If you're getting about 40 to 48 Fahrenheit overnight at your minimum, or your maximum, it doesn't sound like it gets that cold, in other words. So just make sure your coop is airtight and dry from the external elements, and you'll be okay in a real mild winter like that. I have a question of a different nature here from Sue. Sue asks about her friend's goat. She says the poor thing's hair is falling out and his skin is itchy and flaky. The vet checked for mites and they gave him front lines, still happening. They're giving him flaxseed oil and sunflower seeds internally and rubbing him down with flax oil, but apparently nothing's doing. Well, hi, Sue. Thanks for writing in about this. I really appreciate talking about things that aren't just chickens. I know that this is AgriCast Digest sponsored by ChickenCoopGuides.com, but we do like to talk about pretty much everything here, even human health. So you guys can feel free to write in whatever you want. Just if we were asking weird questions, we don't have to answer them. If you want to know who was president of Zimbabwe in 1959 or whatever, I'm not going to bother with that. But if it's pertinent to the show, we'll answer it on air. Anyway, I wanted to tell you again, Sue, thanks for writing. There's a saying in the natural health community that internal problems are often externally manifested. So when we have an issue with our bowels, for example, it's going to show up on our skin. Dysbiosis is one human complaint that I can think of right off the top of my head that frequently has dry, itchy, flaky skin as a side effect because of fungal takeover. If you don't know what dysbiosis is, it's basically where the bad fungus, yeast, and bacteria in the gut, in the human gut, is overtaking the good probiotic, the healthy stuff that everyone hears about in yogurt commercials. So when that's taking over, you have a side effect on the skin, among other horrible side effects. The vet seems to be checking only for external problems when I think that the problem is probably inside. I would start looking at what the goat is eating other than those oil-giving seeds. Is the goat eating a lot of starchy or sugary foods? For example, it's just kind of like vent gluten hens can be caused by diet. This sounds like the same thing for your friend's goat, since I'm assuming that the vet probably already ruled out ringworm when they ruled out mites during the external exam. Now, mineral deficiencies can also cause problems with goats, so you want to ask your vet or local farm supply store for a good mineral supplement for goats. Off the top of my head, the other things you might try is a once or twice a week scrub down with some diluted raw apple cider vinegar. If you've got Azure Standard, you can get a whole gallon of raw apple cider vinegar for very inexpensive. Just pour half of it in, put half a gallon of it in a bucket or a quart of it in a bucket with some hot, some nice warm water, and get a kind of curry comb type brush and dip it in there and kind of pour it over the goat and scrub her down gently to where she enjoys it. I think that might help with that. It'll help bring up the flakiness, and it'll also help reduce any fungus that might be on the skin causing the problem. Also try feeding maybe some yogurt, and probiotics. That along with checking with the mineral deficiency, that's what I would do for the goat. I have one last question here today, and it comes from Jim Toulis, and he writes, Jim wants to know how to introduce new pullets into a flock without pecking and fighting. Well, hey there, Jim. Unfortunately, I have to tell you that's probably just not going to happen the way you like. They're going to peck and they're going to fight, and you're going to hate it. And there are things that you can do to help ease the transition, but you're not going to prevent them from fighting. Boredom prevention devices like cabbages and tennis balls on a string, that's going to cure a lot of problems right there, because they're going to have something to take their aggression out on instead of each other. I would throw a little bit more treats than normal during that transition week. That'll help. Just don't throw too many, or you're going to have another problem on your hands. You can quarantine the newbies near the old chickens where they can smell and see each other, and that'll help a lot. Also, maybe slip the new birds into the coop at night while they're all sleeping, and that can also help sometimes too. When they all wake up together, sometimes it really helps them adjust to each other. Just make sure that the birds you're introducing are old enough to fight back. Now, we lost, when we had our very first flock, we lost 4 or 5 little ones that way because we thought that the mother hen would protect them better. So I speak from experience when I say ensure that they're at least 6 to 8 weeks old and that they can fight back on their own. Otherwise, you're going to have a slaughterhouse on your hands, and that's really something to cry about. That's all the questions I've got for today, folks. Go ahead and keep sending those questions in. Like I said, just about anything you can think of. If you've got a question about it, go ahead and send it in. It can be human health, animal health, anything animal or human related. Just, like I said, not too crazy. But that's all for today, folks. So you all have a good night, and God bless.
You've been listening to AgriCast Digest. If you like what you just heard, please share with your friends. And don't forget to go to ChickenCoopGuides.com/podcast to download transcripts and archives of this episode, as well as take advantage of any freebies or trials offered in this episode. You can then visit our private podcast Facebook page, also linked there. This has been a Bluebird Media production.